Founders, welcome back to the 0 to 5,000 podcast, where we obsess over the convergence of human potential and business results. Today, our hosts Drew McClure and Jordan Mitchell have another insightful conversation for you. So let's jump right in.
Okay, founders, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are joined by Matheus Riolfi. Matheus is the co-founder and CEO of Tint. Before this, he was the director of international expansion at Turo and launched the company in Canada, the UK, and Germany. He pioneered the operations, including designing risk management in different stages of the company and sourcing insurance in various countries. He is a licensed insurance broker in all 50 states, holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a dual degree in business from the University of Sao Paulo and Kedge Business School. And today, to tell us about his own entrepreneurial journey, is Matheus. Matheus, thank you for being here, buddy.
Hi, Drew. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Excited to get to know you some. So how did this get started? Where did Tint come from? The idea, what led to this business being born?
Yeah, so Tint was born as a product that we wished existed as we were working at Turo. So both my co-founder, Jerome, and I were early employees at Turo. We joined the company around 2013 when it was like a 15 people team. And we, for different reasons, ended up working in insurance. So as you mentioned, I was the head of international. So creating new markets is pretty much creating a new insurance product for Turo. And my co-founder, he was the head of data science and engineering. So he was working a lot with the kind of underwriting of the models, the data stack that would calculate prices and measure risks and things like that. So we both, by accident, got into this kind of insurance world that we neither were anticipated ever working with. We both loved it. We were, as we were building that at Turo, we saw the opportunity and how Turo was becoming a huge driver, our insurance was becoming a huge driver of the Turo business and created a lot of value for users, really enabling the core business to exist and thrive. But we also saw how hard it was for a company that was not a tech company, without an insurance DNA, trying to build all of this in-house with no help, no partners, no technology. And it was for Turo, it was a multi-year journey, like 7+ year journey to get good at it. And we were like, well, as founders, as entrepreneurial people, it's like, well, isn't that an opportunity that we can get out and build a company that will offer what we're building here at Turo for others, for like any brand out there in any vertical that could benefit from having insurance as part of their products and services, or as a feature of their product and services. So that was really the origin story of Tint. And then we we found Tint about almost like 6 years ago now. And then we've been in this journey of different, as a founder journey, never linear, like in different angles, in exploring how to deliver on this original idea. How can we help any brand in any vertical create insurance products that help them accelerate the core business and make more money in the process?
So for Turo, was the insurance that you were having to figure out, was that for the person that's like saying, hey, I'm going to let my car be available for rent? And how does that work if there's an accident or an injury? Is that kind of what the feature was?
That's right. So the thing about Turo is a peer-to-peer car sharing marketplace. So they connect people with cars or drivers who want to use cars. And you can rent as fancy as the car as you want there, including Ferraris and all the way to simple cars. As I'm renting your car, what happens if there's an accident? What happens if I steal your car and never come back? There are many things that can go wrong. And you as an owner, you want that security that whatever happens, you are protected, right? You were going to be made whole. And as a driver, I would also want to make sure that I'm not on the hook for potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of losses if anything happens in my trip. And I think that's the kind of assurance or protection product that Turo offered. And it took almost 2 years for the company to come up with the first version of this product. Insurance is a highly regulated, highly complicated market. And we see that now. That was our inspiration use case. But for example, now we work with a company called UShip So you can ship things from anywhere to anywhere in the US. So say shipping a car or shipping a bicycle or shipping furniture, whatever you want from say Boston to San Francisco. And things may break, right? Like if things are moving,
Right.
they may break. So we work with you ship. We created a way that they just, as you're purchasing the moving service, you see a box that say, for another $50, do you want to add protection to the strip? So if there's any damage to your car, to your furniture, whatever, you are covered. And that's kind of another example of a use case that companies can use to make insurance a better, make their core business better.
Right. So what I'm curious about is, insurance obviously already exists. Businesses offering insurance for things already exists, but you mentioned you wish that there were capabilities or maybe the ease of building that out that wasn't there. What was the actual thing that you spotted where you're like, hey, we could create a company that does this better?
Yeah, I think, is a story, or like if you think about any SaaS, right? Like most SaaS, they are replacing something that already existed, but it was done poorly, inefficient. So, and I think the same story for us, right? So we see ourselves in a way as a SaaS, or this infrastructure that helps power the company different insurance products with different pieces and whatever complexities that they need. And can they do it by themselves and put all the pieces together? They can. We did that at Turo, so of course they can. But should they do that? The answer is no, right? Because if we can do our jobs and create a better infrastructure, a better SaaS they can use to build on top and really leapfrog all this complexity, and spend a lot less money than if they were to do in-house, they should do it. The same way that any company can own servers, and actually before AWS, they all did it. But it doesn't mean that today, as you're running a company, you should have a full building dedicated for servers. You just should pay Amazon or Microsoft or whatever, one of those cloud solutions, because it's a much better business outcome for you.
Makes sense. So what I'm always curious about is the time from when you're working at, for you it's Turo, but for somebody else, they might be working a different job and they have this idea and the idea is kind of germinating inside of them. Mm-hmm. But then there's the, when did I decide I was actually going to take the leap and actually build this thing from an idea to a reality? What was that for you?
I mean, you're right that I always I've always been looking for ideas to build. So my background is I'm originally from Brazil. I came to the US to go to business school. And the reason why I came is that I wanted to launch global businesses. And I think that this is the best place in the world. And especially for technology, I think it was Silicon Valley. So that's a little bit of what I did. So, even when I joined Turo, I was joining Turo to acquire some skills that I think were required for me to start a successful venture capital business in the US. For example, I didn't have the connections. So other than my business school network, I didn't know anybody in the US. So that's hard to build a business when you don't have connections for your first investors, your first customers. I had never seen how to run a world-class startup. And again, throughout my 4 years at Turo, the company scaled from 15 to 400 people, highly successful. So I was able to participate, but also experience what it looks like. And the last thing is it's having a problem that you have experience with that you think is you can solve. So again, throughout this entire process of this 4 years at Turo, we solved this problem firsthand. We were able to learn and become potentially the best specialists in the world, right? So as a founder, it's very important to be solving problems that you experience firsthand, because that gives you typical insights that others. And one question I have all the time is how did you get your embedded insurance? That's so weird and niche. How do you even think about it? Well, we worked on that for 4 years, right? We solved the problem, we experienced. And then to your point, I'm not sure if I remember exactly what was the time when we say, okay, now we're ready, let's go. But that was built over now 3.5 years working at Turo. I think we made a decision about, I think it was about 6 months before we left the company. communicated to the CEO, who ended up being our first check, our first angel check. And then, it took me 6-year transition each from Turo to Tint. But long way of saying that, like, yeah, for me, it was a gradual process that was intentional and gradual that was building over a few years.
Man, the fact that you were able to build that transition out and have your former employer be one of your first investors, I think is a really beautiful story, because many people don't know how to transition, chase a dream, leave a company without burning a bridge. How did you accomplish that?
Yeah, but that's a very important point. I would say the way I accomplished that is to be transparent and understanding. So as I mentioned, I ended up staying 6 months from the date that we agreed that I was going to leave to when I actually left, because I was working through some important launches internationally, some important projects. So I stayed 6 years to close those out and transition. And I think that bought me a lot of, I had worked with the CEO for 3.5 years. So I think we already had a great working relationship. But that last mile, I think, was very important, because some people just say, you know what, I'm in the US, I have a 2-week notice period, I'm off in 2 weeks, good luck, it's not my problem anymore. Like, that doesn't build long-term relationships, right? And I think I was very intentional about doing that. And the other things, like my former boss, he knew me, right? Like, he knew I was a founder. He tried to, it was funny. I will never remember the call when I told him, it's like, hey, I want to leave. I want to start my own business. I think he tried to convince me for about 10 minutes to stay. Like, no, why? We'll give you more scope, or we'll give you a promotion, whatever it is. But it was like 10 minutes, because he knew deep down that was not going to be what would get me the most excited. He knew me. He knew I could be a founder, and he had gone through the same journey himself. So he went very quickly from, sure, let's do it, I will support. Now let's make sure we have a transition plan in place so Turo doesn't suffer from your departure.
I love that. Yeah, the transparency, he actually knows you. It takes emotional maturity on his side too. That speaks to him as a leader to, recognize, hey, I'm not the only person here with a dream. I'm not the only person here with a skill set. Why would I get in the way of that, right? Mm-hmm. But you caring for his thing and showing I'm going to leave it better, than I found it. I mean, reputation goes a long way. And as big as the world is, it's also small in terms of, one CEO talking to another and saying, hey, this guy really, really is untrustworthy or whatever. And that could impact your business, versus saying, no, he used to work for me. He's great. We support what he's doing. That can go a long way in helping your new business, correct?
Yes, and that's what happened to us. So as I mentioned, he was the first angel check that we had. And the first institutional check was his former boss, because our first check was, the institutional check was from this company called Web Investment Network that is run by Maynard Webb, who was the COO of eBay in eBay's heydays, like when eBay was Facebook and Amazon of today, right? So this guy, knows everybody in the Valley, is an amazing mentor, an amazing kind of investor. And Andre is part of the network of the web, of the web company, the Win company. So I remember waking up. I was in London because I was still living in London, and before I came back to the Bay Area, and I wake up with this email that is a thread between Andre introducing us to Maynard, and then that led to our first institutional check. And to your point, had I not, kind of plant the seeds and being a thoughtful, respectful, responsible employee while on my time in Turo, I would not have access to that kind of things, and it could really kind of jumpstart our process as we were working with teams.
What was that first year like?
First year for us was trial and error and trying to figure out a direction. So if you think about, we are almost 6 years old, as I mentioned, and our core product, what we sell today, is probably 2.5 years old. Or let's call it maybe 3. So it means that half of our journey so far has been exploring, has been launching a product, getting initial traction, but then seeing that that was not enough to go to the next stage. And I think our first year was a lot of that, was a lot of like, okay, we have this crazy vision. If this vision works, we're going to reinvent the entire insurance industry. That's obviously a massive undertaking. How do we figure out what is the path of least resistance to get this journey going? And that was all our first, honestly, our first 3 years of the company were. And then we got to a point where we found it out, and that's when our company started to scale. But yeah, lots of trial and error.
Yeah. What was the major kind of learning that you had as the founder in those first years where you're going through the iterations, you're going through the learning curve? What did you learn was kind of needed on your part to do that well?
I think as a founder, I'll go back to very principle basic from Y Combinator, which is talk to your customers. I think as founders, like there are different ways that we can get information, that we can get inspiration. I think as a founder, you need to have a vision, and you need to have opinions on things because that's what you bring to the world. Like if you cannot have the unique insight, then it's likely you're not going to succeed as a company. But even if you have insights, there's a market out there. It's all hypotheses, and they're in the early days. You're going to be right in a few of them. You're going to be wrong in some. So getting good as an early stage to 0 to 1 founder, to going out there, have access to potential customers, being good and distilling the learnings, that you're not necessarily going to build what they're telling you. Because again, going back to Henry Ford, right? If I ask what my customers want, they would tell me faster horses. That is true for the most part. So, or Steve Jobs, right? Nobody would ask me for an iPhone. Like that is the job as you as a founding team to figure the solution. But at least be out there, spending a disproportionate amount of time uncovering insights, uncovering problems from customers, and going back to build. I think in hindsight, we were specialists, as I mentioned. We were building those things for Turo. So we had strong hypotheses of things, how they should work, and frankly, how customers should behave. And we were wrong in many of those, or we were right, but it was too niche, and then there was not enough of them. And so I think we learned a lot in the early days about how to navigate that. I think if we were to do it again, those first 3 years that I mentioned, we could probably compress them in 6 months, maybe one, just by being more efficient and knowing how to do it.
What surprised you most? Like in the assumption that we had this assumption, we thought the market wanted this or needed this, and we were surprised that actually it was this over here.
I think what surprised most, again, our domain is tint.ai, right? So our first angle was pure AI, and it was back in 2018 before ChatGPT. There was still a hype around AI, but like not nearly as much as today. And what surprised me the most is that, think about, we were designing the engine of a Ferrari that arguably and technically is probably the world-class, the best technology, the best you can get as far as an engine goes. But then we learn, it's like, well, most of the market wants Honda Civics or Tesla 3s, and there's no point designing this kind of fancy engine that the very few people would actually use it. So I think that was, again, in hindsight, our mistake is like designing for power users like us. That is not where the market is. Like to this day, 6 years later, embedded insurance is in its infancy, right? Everybody believes that this is going to change insurance. It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. But the reality is like there's just the early adopters are starting to tinker with this concept. So you're already selling a product to the most sophisticated mainstream customers, and there was a gap there. And I think we learned, we adapted, and today we almost like sell the Tesla 3 instead of, and the full car, or it's turnkey, plug and play, as opposed to selling the most sophisticated engine and getting them to go build the rest of the car by themselves and a luxury car, right? And that case.
That makes total sense. Now, how does AI fit into this?
Yeah, so again, the main thing we were doing, like AI, it's going to fit in many different ways to deliver insurance experience, right? From the price you see, it's going to be AI powered. And that's kind of how we started. Our first product was a AI or machine learning powered score to assess risk in real time. So going back to the Turo example, when you're trying to rent that Porsche in LA for that specific date, with your age, with your browsing experience, whatever things that it can be factored, how can we in real time spin up a number that tells the company this is high risk, so either you don't let that happen or price it higher, or this is low risk. Like how do we do this access in real time? That's where AI eventually is going to play out, because the pricing you pay, whatever, is going to be defined by a complex machine learning algorithm. But AI can help with operations, can help with claims, like how do you adjust